You are listening to Able Radio, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
Welcome to Able Business Radio. My name is Zachary Sexton, and today I am excited to be speaking with Mr. Josh Fonger. Welcome, Josh.
Glad to be here.
We were chatting beforehand, and I was asking, hey, Josh, what the heck should I call you? I know you're the owner of a big consulting firm. You're a coach that teaches small business owners how to systematize and automate their business. And one word you came up with that I thought was really cool, is a little sexy. You're a small business performance architect. What does that mean?
Well, and I was trying to come up with a title for myself, in terms of what I do, and being that my undergraduate degree is in architecture before I got my master's in business, that's what I like to do. I like to architect business solutions to improve performance, and so my clients are small business owners, usually, and we dissect their business, and we figure out exactly what they're going to be building, and we architect solutions that are scalable, sustainable, and produce growth. And then we measure the performance. So I thought, well, that's probably the best way to title myself as I do what I do.
Perfect. And what kind of performance metrics are you trying to reach?
Well, everyone wants a broader top line and a fatter bottom line. Also, using the work the system methodology, the one that Sam Carpenter built and made famous through the book Work the System. It's also about freeing up the owner's time, their bandwidth. So that's another metric that we're focused on, is if you're an owner that's stuck doing the work, how do we systematically free you up from that to do higher value work, more entrepreneurial work to grow your business. So that's a big one. But I leave measurement systems, we call them measurement systems, towards the end of end of the life cycle when I'm working with a client, because there's usually so many things that we can change, modify, innovate early on that change up their business so much that if we start measuring on day one, we're measuring apples and oranges midway through. So measurement's kind of like the final piece when you're really fine-tuning and getting more precision out of what you do. But very important.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for. Make more money and save more time. So if you're tuned in, you're not sure if you want to listen to the rest of this episode, do you want to make more money? Do you want to save more time? Josh knows how to do that. You've done that with, how many hundreds of people have you worked with at this point?
I don't have a count off the top of my head, but it's over 500 now. So the way Sam and I organize the business is he truly is the visionary. He is set the standard, he's lived it, he's done it, and we partnered up because his methodology is based on having a replacement, having someone do the work, and so we made that partnership years ago. And so he said, okay, Josh, now you go take this methodology into these companies. And so that's what I've done over the years, is literally, any industry I can think of, at least 100 industries, 50 countries, 500 businesses, and they've ranged from startup to $500 million a year in sales. So kind of a wide range. Most of them are small companies, but every once in a while we've got a larger company that really wants to infuse this methodology into their culture and take that business, even if it's large, to the next level.
And that's what I was noticing. I can't believe it was 2 years ago, but 2 years ago you were my coach. I was in a group, Work the System group coaching. It was a 3-month-long or 12-week program where you walk through everything in the Work the System methodology, starting with the strategic objectives, then your operating principles, and then your working procedures. And if folks want to find out more about it, it's if you go to workthesystem.com, you can actually, I believe that's an offer you guys still have, is you can get the book for free. And I think if you tweet it out or you do something, you could even get the audio book for free. And that's how I first came across Sam's material. Is I got the audio book and I listened to it on a vacation, and I just came back on fire, and I said, hey guys, I was part of a small team. I think there was 6 of us at the time. I would love to be doing more of this. Ended up interviewing Sam for a podcast I was doing at the time. And then we ended up enrolling in the course and really just systematizing the bejesus out of our business, and ended up saving so much more time, making a lot less mistakes. That was a big part of it. We just were more consistent with our offering, and sales and client fulfillment and administration. So it's huge. But for people who don't know about it and aren't as excited about Work the System and even systems in general, maybe you could give a brief overview. Maybe we could start with, what is a system? What are the type of systems that you teach small business owners who want to make more money and save more time, which I hope is most of them?
Yeah, well, a lot in that, Zach. Let me see if I can unpack it. First off, yeah, if you want the whole story, workthesystem.com. It's a pretty good lead magnet in that we give you the book for free. All we ask is your email address, so you can get the free book there, and then you can get the audio download. But the story, in a nutshell, is basically to see your world as a collection of systems. So even if you're just starting off with a business, is to see the separateness of the systems, whether how you answer the phone, how you handle that client request, how you write that blog post, how you do everything that you do as separate, and then to dissect those pieces individually and come up with the perfect way to do those pieces. And this is Sam's thesis, is that if all of the pieces of your business are perfect and you put them together, you're going to have a perfect business. And that's what we do. And so in order to write these systems, you have to first have that mindset shift, to not see your world as kind of chaotic and reactionary, but instead be outside and slightly elevated, looking down on yourself, looking down on your business, and thinking objectively, what am I spending my time on, and what does my business consist of? And once you find those pieces, then it's not so overwhelming. Instead of just my company needs to make more money, it's my company needs to get better at its initial onboarding phone call. How do I get that initial onboarding phone call perfect? That's a system. Let's actually document it. Let's write it down. Because again, keeping it in your head, it's never going to get to perfection, and you're never going to be able to train it, cross-train with it. You're never going to be able to react to it. You'll never be able to measure it appropriately if you don't actually have it in writing. So that's what we do in terms of systemizing companies, is get them to that level of detail. Now with a new company, that's kind of overwhelming, because you probably have nothing documented and everything's in your head. And so the real goal is to realize you're going to need to build a team in order to grow your business, to grow your freedom, and they can't read your mind, and they don't know what's important to you, and they're not thinking like a business owner because it's not their business. So how do you make that happen? And there's three big pieces of the puzzle. We try to keep it simple, because if it's simple, it's scalable. If it's complex, it's not going to happen. So those pieces are the strategic objective, first setting the direction for your business and being very clear about what you're trying to build. Second thing is the operating principles. Those are all of the those are the rules or the guidelines for decision making for your team. So what do you believe about time, about investment, about resources, about strategy, about design? You're defining those soft skills so that everyone assimilates around a common way to do business. How do you define good communication? Things like that are all in those principles. And so if your team has the strategy, they know where they're going, they have the principles, then it's easier for them to execute. And the execution is on the tasks, which are working procedures. That's what we call those separate tasks. And then over time, you're going to accumulate a procedure for how do you answer the phone? Okay, this is the best way to do it. We say this, we do this, we transfer this way. Or how do we onboard a new client? Well, first we do this. How do we hire? How do we train? Every single thing you do, you're going to accumulate over time those best practices, those ways of doing it, those systems. And it's a mathematical equation that the clients I work with, the more of those pieces of the puzzle they can get down on paper, digitally or physically, it directly correlates with the more time, the more freedom, the more profitability, the more revenue of their business every single time. And so I work with them over time. It's not just you do it in a day. It's a culture, it's a lifestyle, it's a strategy, and as you work it, you build time and freedom. I just had a client, you can go through the program you went through, and she has Gretchen's her name, if she ever listens to this, and she and her team wrote 45 procedures in 4 months. Okay, she's got a team. They make websites for the health and fitness industry, and they have 4 employees and 3 contractors that work with her. So not a large company. And essentially within that time period, 4 months, her work week's gone down 20%. They've doubled in their revenue in terms of the number of clients they can work with, and the margins have gone up, the mistakes have gone down, the stress has gone down, the consistency has gone up. It's a direct reflection of the work she's put in to building these systems, and it's pretty cool because that's not a short time blip. That's not a sprint. That's she's built sustainable future. She's built assets that are going to last. So if one of those contractors leaves, if a client leaves, the systems won't leave, right? The systems are there. That infrastructure is there, and it needs to be updated over time, but it's going to last, and the culture is going to last. And so it's pretty exciting for her. Her company could be 5 times bigger next year, with less work from her, and that's what I get excited about. I get excited about that paradigm shift that these systems allow people to go through, and it doesn't happen through just hard work. So I know, kind of a long answer to a short question, but that's what I'm excited about.
I think it was actually a long answer to a long question. So you did a great job with my my meandering Q&A here. I love the example, and maybe we could flesh things out even more if you have much memory with Gretchen's work, with her strategic objective and her maybe an example of her principles and an example of a working procedure. Do you have any of that top of mind?
Let's see. With her with her strategic objective, and that's where we start with every company. It's first about exactly what to do, and like most entrepreneurs, it was loose. It was, we help people with their digital, I think she started off by just saying their digital presence. And I was like, well, let's be more specific. What exactly is that? Because is it SEO? Do you do podcasts? How about design? Do you do rebranding? There's all these different things. And she's like, well, actually, we really, as a production, we really just do this website. And then it was, what industries? Let's be specific. And so we really wanted to drill down and have alignment. A lot of efficiency comes through alignment. And so it was, okay, her team's skill set, where they want to stick their flag in the sand, had to do with exactly this industry, this health and fitness industry. And it's exactly with these kinds of websites, and it was exactly these kind of services. And so once we had that, then you could develop more templates, you could develop more systems. And then it wasn't like you need to have her, because she's very accomplished, work with the clients. She could start to say, this is a client type A, it goes to this team. This is a client type B, goes over here. This is a client type C. And that really allowed her to systemize things. Otherwise, it's just too broad, and you have to bring on people who can handle complex situations that are always changing, and that's difficult to scale. It's very difficult to scale. It's very expensive and time-consuming to manage, and it's difficult to compete in this marketplace, especially online, because you're competing with the world. And so that was the big thing for her, is first getting her strategy to be isolated in terms of what they were really going to focus on and what they were going to say no to. And she had to actually say no to some clients that she's currently working with. Not by firing the clients, though you can do that, but by saying, what, here's a new pricing structure. You fit into a client type C, and you also want us to do these extra services, and this is the cost of those. So it's increasing the price and saying, if you want more customization, that does actually cost more. And so that's a big thing I think small business owners forget, is that customization is expensive. Variability is expensive. And so you need to say, this is what I do. Anything outside of that costs a lot for you and a lot for your clients. And if they don't want that, then they'll stay within the boundaries. And that's the only way to get good at something. So that was kind of the first piece with her, is that strategy had to be worked through. Now,
that seems massive. It seems like that probably was the thing that allowed her to scale so much more and to be so much more profitable, even before you get to the procedures and operating principles, because of all the reasons you stated. It's simpler. You can hire out, and somebody doesn't have to have years of experience like she does. They can be more of a novice and follow the procedures that then she could create, and she doesn't have to create an overwhelming number of them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that really is the key. And most people haven't really gotten that laser focused yet. And so I don't even want them to write procedures, because they don't know what they're writing procedures for. And they might be writing procedures for a part of their business that actually is not the most profitable, is not the most scalable, is actually a loser in terms of what they're doing. And they should really just try to reduce that piece of the work they do, or at least increase the price a lot. So that's an important first step. We do it with all of our clients. And that was the key thing for her. And then the second piece, operating principles.
Sorry, Jess, before we move on to that one, I've noticed this in myself, and I can imagine that there's other people who have this too, is difficulty with that focusing down, with that narrowing down, because it almost feels like, okay, if I'm only working with websites, and I could do all these other things, and I'm only working with fitness professionals, and I could really I could build a website for anybody. Doesn't that constraint almost make it feel like you're handicapping yourself? You're not open to as much of the market. And what would you say to people who have that thought, that idea?
Yeah, well, I think it's a normal idea. It's a strategic constraint. So you're putting it on yourself. It's the decision between letting the clients and the market determine your business strategy, and you being proactive about it, and you being proactive about what is your ideal client, what is your ideal service, so it's it's very much you focused, and I think it's important, and yeah, you actually have to say no to certain work, and I think the easiest way to do it especially for smaller businesses starting out, is you do that by changing the price. Like me personally, we're adjusting our business structure, and I don't like to do consulting. Well, I actually enjoy consulting, but I don't like to travel because I'm away from my family, and I know it's not as scalable as other parts of our business right now. So how do I do that? Well, I'm not going to say no. If someone wants to write me a $100,000 check, I'm not going to say no, but I have increased the price, right? So if someone wants me to come work at their company, it's going to be $3,000 a day. Less people want to do that. So then that helps steer them towards the parts of the business I do want them to be involved in, like the events, like the group coaching, like the one-on-one coaching. All right, so I'm pushing them towards the systems I'm building. So I'm building more systems in my business associated with things that are scalable. And I'm not saying no to the other stuff. I'm just making the price high enough so it's worth my time, because as an entrepreneur, that's your most limiting resource. So if you say, in Gretchen's case, she says, okay, I just want to work in the health and the fitness industry. And then if someone comes to her and says, hey, we're with the government, we want to do a new healthcare website. And she's like, well, it's not really in my wheelhouse. And they're like, well, we're going to pay you $6 million. Well, I'll do that one off, so you're be willing to do those things, but know that they're not part of your core strategy. They're part of kind of the dance you have to do in a small business that's more entrepreneurial. And then what I tell entrepreneurs is that you do that work and you take the money from that work and you reinvest it in the parts of the business that are more scalable and more systematic and that will grow without you being there, as opposed to getting stuck into that line of business. I had one client, and it was kind of heartbreaking. He did custom cabinets, and we wrote this strategic objective. He was in New York City, and he had this specially designed software, very expensive, special CNC machine. He had some really artistic folks with his team to help make these cabinets beautiful, right? So custom, high-end, multi-million-dollar homes, that's where they did the cabinets. And I said, great, so now you know this is where you should stay. This is the box where you make the most money, the most margin, because you got this special software, special CNC routing tool that no one else has. Awesome. And then then he stopped. He missed the next week's session. Then he missed the next week's session. I said, hey, where are you? And he's like, well, we took on this job. It was a $2 million job, but it was not custom cabinets. It had nothing to do with his CNC machine. It had nothing to do with his design, and it was just low-end production cabinets. It was a big job, and he essentially made zero margin on it and worked 7 days a week, and he was stuck doing that for at least a year. And so, anyways, in that case, bad idea. He shouldn't have said yes to it. He should have just stayed focused into what his strategic objective is. But it's a great question, Zach. I think people need to realize what part of the business life cycle they're on. If they're more established, they can really set the rules. If they're less established, they have to be willing to make a couple exceptions along the way so that they can bring in the revenue to then build the appropriate part of their business that is scalable, that doesn't require them. Make sense?
That makes utter sense. That was genius. And I do have another follow-up question before I let you move on to operating principles. Gretchen
Sure.
had been in business for a little while. She had a team.
Yep.
She recognized what sort of businesses were the highest margin, or maybe she just likes working with them, or maybe the templates are a little bit easier, whatever it is. She had an idea that she could pull from that then she strategically constrained herself in order to be more profitable and more scalable.
Yes.
When you're super early, how do you know that? Is there any way to start off? Is it just like lick your finger and put it in the air and see which way the wind blows? How do you start to can you decide that, or do you just sometimes need to throw some spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks?
Yeah, great question.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Not for myself, Josh.
Yeah, right. I'm a pragmatist, so I definitely deal in reality. I was looking at this Inc. article. 96% of businesses go out of business within 10 years. Most people are going to go out of business. That's the hard truth. If you're good, you're going to go out of business. If you're okay, you're going to go out of business. If you're great, you'll probably go out of business. You have to be actually really, really good. And to do that, you have to kind of overcome a few milestones in the first few years. And the reality is, how do I put this that makes the most sense for the most viewers? The longer you've been in business, the easier it is to streamline. In the beginning, the phrase, and I don't know who coined it, work begets work, is key. So you kind of take what you can get in the beginning, and the more you work, the better you will get at your work. The more you will work, the more referrals and upsells and downsells and cross-sells you'll get. The more you work, the more you will have a chance to work on your systems and perfect your craft. So I'm a believer in the beginning is you take kind of what you can get. You take who comes towards you within reason, and then it's a whittling process over the years. So in the case of you, you're gonna make your best strategic direction for your podcast and the kind of work you do, Zach, or anyone else in that position. And then you're going to say, you know what, I really like a certain industry, or based on my background and my history and my education, I really am good at this. I've got a copywriter I work with. He spent a number of years in the insurance industry. Then he said, you know what, I want to do copywriting for everything. And then after a couple of years, he said, you know what, I'm just going to do copywriting for the insurance industry. Because he realized that was his background, that was his training. He knew the language, he knew the lingo. He had a comfort level of selling points, hooks, pain points. He kind of knew it, and so that allowed him to be more of a production copywriter. And I think that's what you have to decide. Now, you and I are both kind of in the training industry, so we can train anybody in our methodology. And so instead of picking a niche like health and fitness, you might pick a niche like your methodology. It's a methodology niche. So for us, the methodology is the work the system method. So that's our niche. Anyone can come to us, but they only can come to us if they want this thing. And that's what makes it exclusive. That's what makes it protectable. That's what makes it unique. And we don't have to compete with anyone in what we do because no one else does it. And so I think that's the other thing that entrepreneurs need to think about. It can go on for, I can go on and on about this, and it really, it does depend on the individual. And I think that's why the strategic objective is so important, to spend some time with it and then to test it out, spend some more time with it, test it out, and you might be adjusting it, tweaking it, narrowing it, constricting it for years. And that's okay. So Sam's business, Sam Carpenter, the author of the book, my business partner, he had a business called Centratel. They're an answering service. They answer people's calls. They redirect them. They're a 24/7 operator. And so they could do that for anybody in the world, any industry in the world. But what they realized is that there were 6 markets. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but HVAC, vets, veterinarians, home health, hospice. There's a few different industries. These industries need this service the most. They are willing to pay the most for it, and they want perfection in terms of no mistakes on the name, the number, the transfer, the relays. And so he said, you know what, if I'm going to work with these 6 markets, I can build systems exactly what they want. They're not price sensitive as much as the other market areas, so I can make the most margin. And so he designed all of his systems around those market areas, around that strategy. So it gave him total alignment. And I think whenever you have misalignment, from the strategy down to the principles, down to the procedures, down to the people, down to the measurements, whenever there's misalignment, you have waste and dysfunction. And that alignment doesn't happen in a day. That's an alignment that you have to keep going back to, especially if you're a new business. Every quarter, take a outside and slightly elevated look down and say, you know what, where are we off? And the funny thing is, I was working with another call service, kind of like Sam's, and she said, what our customers really like is customer service. And after talking to her and realizing what her customers were paying for, I said, actually, the thing that you're striving to do the most is actually something that they don't care about and they're not willing to pay more for. So maybe you should focus your systems on something else.
Yeah, customer service, that's the baseline.
Yep.
I want convenience. I want to feel special. Customer service, I expect.
Exactly. And she thought customer service came in the way of talking to the customers longer. And so she was getting paid on number of calls she handled, but yet she was taking a long time for each phone call because she thought that time equaled customer service. And I said, actually, these customers, maybe they want speed and quality, and you can do speed and quality in half the amount of time and double your profitability per customer. And that's the direction she went, and she obviously made a whole lot more money. But she thought she had this misinterpretation of what customers wanted, misalignment, and so she was building systems that did something that actually didn't help her bottom line. I think that a lot of times we can get lost in that. And to be honest, the way people get lost in it is they they've got an open mind and they're reading too many articles. What is Apple doing? What is Warren Buffett doing? What is Zappos doing? And they think about things that are totally irrelevant to their situation instead of what should I do with my micro business for my micro clients, and get extremely specific to that situation instead of, who cares what Facebook is doing? It only matters what you're doing. People get, and that's where I think the clickbait that's online is really a distraction and a disservice to most companies, because it teaches them philosophies that are totally irrelevant to 99% of companies. And I hate seeing small business owners get sucked into strategies that, they work for $1 billion company, but they don't work for a company that's doing $200,000 a year. It's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I try to be very realistic with my clients and say, this is, you've got 2 employees. This is what we're not going to do. We're going to forget everything else that you're reading online, because that is irrelevant and maybe useful once you have 20 employees.
I was being interviewed on another podcast, and the person knew a little bit more of my background, had listened to the podcast for a while, and she's like, "You read a lot of books, Zach. Can you tell me about how people can end up reading more?" I pumped the brakes. I was like, "Okay, yes, I do read a bit. Oftentimes I'm reading the book of the author that I'm having on, so it's there's a need for that, so I understand the ideas, so I can articulate them well and hopefully share an idea, because that's part of my business is to teach and to educate. That's part of my strategic objective, is to be a teacher in order to be a good coach and a consultant. I have a wide variety of areas that I learn and share about, but I only consume things just in time. So, for example, I wanted to improve my showing on LinkedIn, since it's a business social media platform, and so I bought a book on how to do that, and then I had the author on to force myself to read the book, and that's how I go about things, because it is so easy. It's a problem I've seen for years and years at my current company that I run by myself, and the one that before that had to do with productivity too. Overconsumption is rampant, and sometimes, like, even though we're on a podcast right now, sometimes it's time to turn those off and just focus on the problems that you have right in front of you. You've got we've got a little bit of a time crunch here. Maybe we can get back to Gretchen, and so she got that strategic objective, and then that was, it seems like, huge. What about the operating principles? What do those look like? Do you have an example of one? If not hers, maybe another one that you could pull from.
Yeah, definitely. So the operating principles, the key with that is you want people to think, again, like business owners. People want to do a good job. They just usually don't know how to do a good job, or what a good job even looks like. And you assume they know things, but they really don't. A lot of assumptions. And so the principles kind of solve that problem for you. So she wrote principles which enabled her team to then, I don't have any of the principles up, so I was just kind of guessing at what her principles are. Sam has a lot in the back of his book, which I usually reference, so I'm actually pulling up his right here to see some of the principles that I like. So one of his principles that I like is this one on problems. So it's the 7th principle in his book. So he says, problems are gifts that inspire us to action. A problem prompts the act of creating or improving a system or procedure. We don't want setbacks, but when one occurs, we think, thank you for this wake-up call, and take assertive system improvement action to prevent the setback from happening again. So basically, when he wrote this principle, problems are gifts that inspire us to action, that was not the current state of his business. People were afraid to bring up problems. People didn't want there to be any problems. They kind of hide them, they masked over them. And he said, okay, new principle for our business. Moving forward, starting today, problems are gifts that inspire us to action. So when a problem occurs, this is what we're going to do. We're going to say thank you for this wake-up call. We're going to develop a system to prevent it from happening again. This is our new way of operating. This is an operating principle. And so that was a new principle. He's got another one called employees come first. We employ people who have an innate desire to perform at 100%. We reward them accordingly. The natural outcome is we serve our clients well. So this used to be a client-first focus, and he said, you know what? I realized that as a strategy, it's more important to focus on my employees than the customers. And so he spent more time developing incentives, rewards, building up systems to encourage loyalty. And that was aligned with his principles. Again, it's the principles come first, and then you try to align your business activities based on them. So Gretchen, I know she had one associated with deadlines, because she had a team that never kind of hit their deadlines, and so she had a principle talking about being done ahead of time, and that being done on time was still late. And so there was a deadline principle that allowed her to say, okay, team, here's the principle about deadlines. Now you all know what's important. Can we follow this? Does everyone agree this is a good idea? And they, agreed. And then that was kind of the new principle. But unfortunately, don't have any. You'd be surprised. I probably see a couple hundred principles every week from all sorts of companies. So I don't have them memorized.
I didn't imagine so. But that's great. That gets the idea of what these principles are. It's a meta procedure. So think how many times in a business where if a problem could come up, you could be like, okay, if this happens with the sales, if we lose a sale, or if this happens with somebody giving a call and there's a problem, please put it here so we can address that problem in the sales meeting or the admin meeting. Instead, it's like all problems are opportunities. So you don't have to write 16, 17 different procedures. It's just an overarching meta procedure. And then you've got more of the specifics. And I don't know if you remember any of Gretchen's specifics when it comes to things, but maybe you can give a couple examples so we understand what a working procedure is and kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, well, I mean, the most common thing is when we try to start things off with the company is we set up a procedure for how to answer the phone. Now, if you are a total virtual digital business and you don't answer the phone, then it would be how to respond to customers. So there's probably going to be a couple of different canned responses that you want to develop, systemize, articulate so that when this comes in, this is what goes out. It's an automated kind of a response. And that's a very simple system just to get people used to it. Also, we work a lot of times.
So you would suggest starting with simple systems first?
Yes, I would, just to infuse the methodology into the architecture of the business digitally, physically, so they can actually see it, and that you can say, okay, what are the benefit of this? Well, the benefit is, we're consistent now. Now, even a new intern can do this, and they can do it well. The quality's higher. Whatever it is, like there's some incremental benefit. It's probably not much, but something. And then you can run another procedure. Maybe it's your client intake process, and you say, well, we have this kind of meeting we have with the client. It's usually haphazard. Let's get really good with this. So what needs to happen? Well, here are the objectives. Here's how we set up for it. Here's what we ask. Here's what we receive. And then all of a sudden that meeting goes from taking an hour to 40 minutes. And instead of having 2 follow-up questions afterwards, you don't have any follow-up questions afterwards. And instead of the client thinking that you're kind of haphazard, the client's like, wow, this person knows what they're doing. I trust them. So there's a couple of different things, results that happened because of that focus on that one procedure. And so for each company, it's different, but I like to start off with something that is simple and you can put into action tomorrow first, because then that helps them see this works. And then I say, where's your biggest pain point? Gosh, our biggest pain point is that our churn rate, right? People, they sign up for our membership site and then they leave after 30 days. Okay, that's our biggest pain point. Okay, so what are the pieces that produce churn? Well, they get annoyed with our content, or that we're giving them the wrong content, or whatever it is. And then we dig a little deeper, and then say, okay, what the biggest thing is, they feel like we're not really listening to them. Okay, the new system is we're going to call them after day 20, and we're going to talk to them about their specific needs. And if they don't answer the phone, we're going to leave them a nice voice message. That's our new system. Here it is. You wrote it down. And look, our churn rate went from an average of 45 days to an average of 75 days. We just, improved our business model because of this one new system that tackled that one problem that we identified, and let's do another one. And so you kind of go where the pain is, and you start to develop them. Sometimes they're new from scratch, like the one I just mentioned, or they're just refinements of things that you don't know if it's being done consistently across the board, or a lot of times it's things that you were doing as the owner, and you say, you know what, if I documented this, someone else could do this. Like a blog post checklist, final check. Instead of me as the owner doing the final check, maybe I should just write a checklist for the final check, and someone else can do the final check for me because they can follow the checklist. Any capitalization errors, do the links work? Is the image formatted across these different platforms? So the owner takes a procedure and delegates it, and those are a lot of the early ones as well. So kind of as I'm showing you, you kind of have to customize the approach based on the situation, but the method's the same.
Yeah. And then, gosh, Josh, there's so much more I would love to get into. How do you make time for this? How do you make these stick? We'll have to come in for part 2, or folks will have to head on over to workthesystem.com. And one of the things we normally do is ask about a book or a resource or tool. Maybe we can, off the line, get that answer out there and put it in the show notes, because I know you got to run. But Josh, thank you so much. This was incredibly helpful. If people want to connect with you and just say thanks or find out more about what you're getting up to, what's the best place to do that?
Well, I would go to workthesystem.com. That's going to be the best place, because then we give you a number of tools, resources. We'll let you know what's going on in terms of ways we help. That's the website. Then you get the free book and the audiobooks. That would be the best place. Certainly, we're trying to spend a little more time on Facebook in the future. I've got a few videos planned for that page. But I would say the website. That's the easiest place to go. And hopefully we'll see you there. And then, as you mentioned, I do a lot of group coaching, one-on-one coaching, on-site consulting if your company's large enough, and then events. So there's a couple of different ways if you need some help to go there. And the book recommendation, I would say Work the System, not just because, maybe partly because that's the company I work for, but it really did change the way I did my business consulting, because I met Sam and read his book years before he and I worked together. And I would use his methodology with the other consulting work that I was doing for companies, because they always had these challenging solutions, and I wanted to make sure if we built a solution, it was going to be sustainable and last and scalable. So it's a great resource, a great book if you've not digested it yet.
It really is. It's the mindset shift is powerful, and then I feel like the step-by-step actionability is second to none, where a lot of people who come to me to help systematize their business have read E-Myth Revisited, which is great inspiration, but doesn't really give the details as much as it ought to, where I always think of Sam's book as the manual to actually make it done. It gives some inspiration, but it really shows the nuts and bolts of how and why and when to get this all lined out for your business to, like we said at the top of the show, make more money, save more time. So thanks.
Exactly. Well, Zach, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and look forward to chatting again.
Absolutely.